Hello, welcome to another Musing on episode where I'm talking about album releases from the 90s. This video is 1991. Now I've already recorded one take of this, it ended up at 2 hours, and I decided that I should re-record it. So this is the re-recorded version you're watching now. And I've been rather decisive in that the 2 hour one has gone in the bin, never to return. I can't recover it. It's gone. I tend to do that with stuff. I'm quite mercenary with cuts. If I don't like, if something doesn't feel right, it's gone. So there's no chance to get that back. So 1991, unbelievable year for music for me. And in actual fact, the tab list you can see up here with the various albums I want to talk at the top of the video was a lot bigger, and I had to be quite strict in how I select these. So generally the rule is the albums that I talk about at the start of the video, in the sort of first bit, are albums that I listened to at the time they came out, I listened to a lot, and I still listen to now and again. So basically anything that I was late to the party with, I don't discuss until we get to go through the year systematically, which we do in the later part of the video. So I put those to one side, but they will get discussed. And also anything which I raved over at the time, but then fell off fairly quickly. So maybe I had, a summer of a particular album, or one that I was, using to listen to when I was out walking on Ashdown Forest, and then subsequently I haven't really listened to the album again. Now what was interesting is I spent the last 2 or 3 weeks, which is a lot longer than I normally spend in preparation for these videos, listening to stuff from 1991 because there was so much interesting stuff. So I'll sort of talk about that and various other things. I'm also going to do a spin-off episode about a band in particular, and we'll discuss that further into the video. The other interesting thing about 1991 is, as you know, with these episodes, I like to weave in, what was going on in my personal life. So at that point, so from 1981 through to 93, I was working in a laboratory environment, mainly in different labs, at a firm that manufactured in vitro diagnostic kits. I've spoken about it on numerous occasions in numerous videos. And over the years, that resulted me in doing all sorts of jobs. But in all that time, I suppose you could use the expression I was, climbing the slippery pole. And from let me get this right, from 89 to 91, I had a really cool job, one of my favourite jobs of all time, where I was dealing with customer complaints, but also doing process improvement full time as well, using computerization to do that. So we're talking about the era of the IBM PC, the Amstrads, that sort of machine. So yeah, early PC days. I'm trying to think. So from that period, from 8, so I was using the 1512s and the 1680s. Is that right? Yeah, I'm trying to remember the model number on the Amstrads. Anyway, those were primarily the computers that we had in the labs, alongside some quite high-end DEC machines as well, and some Dells that had been specially spec'd up for R&D work, which I didn't tend to use so much. So, but what happened was, I'd spent 2 years doing that job from 89 to 91. In 91, there was a bit of I don't know the best word for it, but the lab I used to work in, where I'd previously been a supervisor in a quality control lab before I did my process improvement and customer complaint role, there'd been a bit of, I suppose you call it, management schism, for want of a better word. Without going into too much detail, there'd been a number of sort of quite heavy fallings out and mismanagement, I suppose, and I'm trying to think of the right word for it really, but just basically people not doing what they were supposed to do and blaming each other. So as a result, in fairly quick order, I think a member of staff resigned after a sort of quite harsh assessment, and then as a result of that, they dropped someone else in it, I suppose, for, again, for want of a better word. It's difficult to remember the exact ins and outs of it, but basically there was someone resigning, which then led to other discussions, which then resulted in someone else being sacked. The person that resigned then said, "Oh, I'd like my job back now," and they said, "No, there's other things you've been implicated in here, I think, or other things. It's just not. There's no winding this back. You've sort of, in some ways, implicated yourself." So there was a situation where suddenly a lab had no senior tech, I think, or supervisor. I can't remember what term we used to use in quality control lab, and no manager. Now, I'd previously supervised the lab in there, that lab. So as a favour, I offered to go back as an interim measure and just stand in. Unfortunately, I don't know if there was they knew the full picture of what was going on. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But this was going on in a background of business volatility where there'd already been one set of redundancies, I think, but things looked fairly settled. And they'd made a few changes. They'd frozen management wages, but gave the staff in an increase. So again, for several years, none of the management got raises. And then they introduced some sort of reward scheme where every month the firm made a profit, everybody would get a bonus. That was working pretty well. Things were sort of turning around to some degree. But what happened was, after I temporarily took the position to help out, there was another wave of redundancies. So it made my original plan and my agreed plan with management to go back to doing what I was doing once they got a replacement in. That made that move untenable in their eyes. So I had to stay in the position. And although I was able to carry on with some process improvement stuff, because that's what I love doing, at that point I was in effect doing 4 different jobs simultaneously. So I was still doing supervisory elements, the management element, some process improvement stuff, and filling in because we were short-staffed anyway. So it was not the 91 to 93 were not the 2 best years of my life in terms of just basically just being overworked, and I did eventually resign over it. And went on to better things in the long term. But musically, that period's awesome. So I had a lot to distract me musically. So that's just setting the scene, like I'd like to do on these chats, these musings. So I thought I'd look at the top best albums of the year on Wikipedia. So these are the sort of albums that, if you look at end of year lists, they keep coming up. The usual suspects. So we got Nirvana, Nevermind, Pearl Jam, 10, My Bloody Valentine, Loveless, U2, Acton Baby, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Blood, Sugar, Sex, Magic, Metallica, so the Black Album, Primal Scream, Screamadelica, Slint's Spiderland, A Tribe Called Quest, The Low End Theory, Massive Attack, Blue Lions, and Talk Talk Laughing Stock. All of these albums I've subsequently listened to in depth, apart from this, funnily enough. Not listened to this an awful lot. Probably listened to some of the singles off of it, but that's about it. And within that, the remaining 10, there's 11 on here, so if we take out that for the moment, a number of these actually end up here as albums that I listened to a lot at the time and then subsequently still listen to. A few others I was late to the party with. I was a bit of a delayed appreciation, so definitely this album took me about a year to get into it. This several years, as same with this and this as well. I only listened to this very recently because as a result of additional research I was doing around the whole post-rock thing, and not only Slint but Talk and bands like what's the name of that band now? Oh, it will come to me. Hex by, I think the band's called Bark Psychosis, and I think the album's called Hex. So yeah, it wasn't necessarily that year, but there's a post-rock association with that album. I think it was the first time that a journalist had used the term post-rock to describe an album, I think, and that was Hex by Bark Psychosis, or Bark Psychosis by Hex. I think it's Hex by Bark Psychosis. Single wise, okay, yeah. So everything I do for you, Bryan Adams. Was it Robin Hood film, Black or White, Michael Jackson, Roxette, Joyride? They were really in the ascendancy. So they'd had a really big album in 1990. I think it was their debut. They did a follow-up album of the same name, 91. Still really big. I really loved them at that time, actually. There's going to be a lot of interesting, what would you call it, like, I don't know, paradox is the right word, but you'll see my musical palette was quite diverse at that point. Scorpions' Wind of Change. I think the album came out the previous year that this was off of, if I seem to remember rightly, because when I was doing the 1990 album release thing, I did bring it up. REM's Losing My Religion from Out of Time. We'll talk about that, but it's not in the list of my sort of all-time favourite albums from 91. So the first one to come up is Arise. Okay, Sepultura. This is my step-on album for the band. I think what happened was I'd seen one of those Hard and Heavy specials, like when there was like a video thing that you could buy. And there was a group of them, and one of them was on, I think, the Florida death metal scene. And around the same time, yeah, but death metal was really big in 1990, into 91. And there were a lot of real landmark albums. A lot of people were recording at or with Scott Burns at Morris Sound. But yeah, there's a lot of pivotal death metal albums that then went on to, in some ways, form their own sub-genres within the scene. So we get hold of a load of those come up. Some have stood the test of time better than others. It's funny, actually. I'm learning to be a bit more careful with album covers now. I actually had a video. I don't know if it was much demonetized. I did this. I dabbled with shorts, and I was doing a 5 decimal album. So that's, it was, I think it was in 2003, 2023. So I did, like 73, 83, 93, whatever. It was something like that. It was either that year or the previous year. And the year I happened to pick, or the month, I think it was a month as well, was the month of a certain year when Rage Against the Machine debut album came out, with that's the Immolation cover on it. And I was going through this short trying to work out which album cover was causing the issue, and because I had to reclassify my video as over 18 only, or the short, and yeah, it was that. I think it was that, because I don't play any music on there and there's no narration, and the other albums were pretty innocuous, I think. Yeah, I can't even remember what was on there, actually. I fixed it last night, late at night. It's quite a surprise getting this email from YouTube saying, yeah, one of my videos has been flagged. I don't know what the term they use, like questionable content or something along those lines. But they said, you had to be like I could either, what was it? Say, I think you're wrong, and I can't remember the exact word now they use, but appeal that, or I could just rebrand it as being 18 only. And I may make so little on those shorts. I mean, they're a bit of a lost cause. I do my own shorts now outside of the shorts thing anyway, if I want to do a video. But the monetization on the shorts is pretty bad, so I wasn't that worried. But I just thought I'd bring that up. So I'm going to skate around a few dodgy album covers. I think this is just sort of disturbing rather than so we definitely won't be bringing up the Cannibal Corpse album cover, although I'll talk about the album. So yeah, Arise, Sepultura. I think I mentioned last week, previous Sepultura album, they wanted to use the cover from another band, didn't they? Death metal band. Was it Cause of Death? Is that right? Yeah. I can't even remember what I recorded 2 weeks ago. But anyway, yeah, the Obituary album for the previous Sepultura album. So there was quite a lot of. Is it going to say here? I don't know if it's got the name of the artist for the cover or not. But yeah, there was an awful lot of very clever artwork around that time with death metal bands and thrash metal bands as well. And some of the artists have become real big names. And if you have any, thrash revival bands or whatever, yeah, a lot of the artwork harkens back to some of that early thrash artwork, and the same with some of the death metal stuff. Anyway, I've digressed, but I think it's an interesting discussion to have about this sort of stuff. So that's when I got exposed and was on some sort of video music review thing like Hard and Heavy. And also, I'm trying to remember the name of the actual live DVD, or it would be live VHS at that point they produced. I think it was called Under Siege. And I have this really cool memory, after I'd bought the album, and I think one of my brothers had a copy of it as well. And then a friend was really into them. And I'd gone down to Brighton with this friend who I used to work with. So that was the one redeeming thing about the job that I was doing. Even though it was stuff I didn't super enjoy compared to the job I was doing, there were several people I worked with there who I used to hang out with. So that was not too bad. And so we sometimes on a Sunday popped down to Brighton. Brighton was my favourite place to go at that point. On a Sunday, the record stores were open. I think it was before the days of official Sunday opening, and some of the record stores were skating the law a bit. And there were like 2 HMVs in Brighton at that point, and an Our Price, and a Virgin Megastore, I believe. And one of the HMVs, I think, was down one end of Brighton, and the other HMV was more up towards, still in Brighton, but towards Hove, opposite the Virgin Megastore there. And so I more often than not would go between the two ones that were closer to the Hove end of Brighton. And anyway, so I was hanging out in Brighton anyway, and one Sunday I went down with this friend from work, and we popped down to the Our Price that was still there. That eventually closed. And it was before they built, this is way before they built the modern shopping centre down there. I think when it was still this really eerie looking, almost like a sort of strip mall style thing that didn't have like it wasn't indoors, and there were all these individual sort of rows of shops. And now I think there was a car park underneath it as well, which there is is now actually. But yeah, but it was a lot more sort of 70s looking, and sort of quite run down. And we were down there, and the live video came on. And they were playing Dead Embryonic Cells, and I remember both of us just instinctively started sort of moving in time with the breakdown, where it goes da-da-da, da-da-da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da-da. There's a sort of breakdown in the song. So that whenever I see this, I have visions of both of us like staring up at these screens and, you know, moving our body in time with the breakdown, and then looking around and seeing that we were both doing it and sort of smiling. So yeah, it's pretty cool. I think on the strength of that, I may have even bought, that's the point at which I bought the Under Siege video. It's a pretty cool one. It's one of those ones where you've got interviews and funny bits from the tour, and yeah, they also do a cover of Motorhead's Orgasmatron actually on that, and which turns up on the remastered version from '97. But the version I heard originally didn't have this on it, so I didn't know until I watched the that live video, that live VHS, that they'd done a cover of Motorhead's Orgasmatron. I think at the tour that I actually recognised the guy from Sacred Reich. I think they were touring with Sacred Reich at that point. Anyway, another album that I bought in Brighton, Blue Lines. And again, I can remember buying this. So I was, with a lot of these, I got these real visual music memories of purchases. And it was actually down at the HMV closest to Hove. And used to walk in there, and all one side was just this wall of the chart. So it would have the full chart. And, you know, I think at that point they must have had definitely the cassette and the CD, maybe even the vinyl as well. I can't remember if there was a load of vinyl on a separate floor, but I don't remember whether they had the vinyl as well on the wall. Probably they did actually, where there was vinyl. So it used to look really cool because you just have this wall of album covers and CDs and cassettes. And so, yeah, I bought this awesome album. It was a great one I was just sort of relaxing on a Sunday after I'd been shopping, preparing myself for the mental challenges of getting back to work on Monday. So I'd just sort of lie on my bed listening to this album, just drifting away. So probably, this was my first exposure to trip hop. And my favourite track on here is Safe From Harm. And there's some great versions of this. I think there's a version on the Outsider soundtrack which has extra guitar on it, which is always cool when that happens. Yeah. Yeah, definitely if you've never checked out trip hop, particularly, you know, trip hop from the time of the Bristol scene. I was lucky enough, a couple of years before COVID, when I was taking the usual yearly trip to the UK before it stopped for a little while. Went up to Bristol and had, I think 3 days in Bristol, and using Bristol as a base, and then also spending a day out in Bath. But yeah, we loved it there actually. There's a hotel right next to the train station, which is really convenient for getting around. So we spent sort of 2 days in Bristol and a day in Bath, and and Bristol was great. And we went around this sort of exhibition they had of Bristol history, and it featured stuff about the trip hop scene in Bristol. So yeah, generally regarded as the first trip hop album. Yeah, do really love this album, and suffice to say, I was listening to it this week. Now, let me have a look at who's on here. So, So got Sean Nelson, Horace Andy. It's got Massive Attack vocals. It's alright, I'm just trying to see if I can recognise. Grantley Marsham, Daddy is Daddy G. Andrew Voles, Mushroom. Okay, it's 3D. Yep. Okay. Something else just bounced into my head that I was going to mention about this. And I'm trying to remember now. It's gone. Oh, Nana Cherry, that was it. I mentioned Nana Cherry in a previous 90s episode because of Eagle Eye Cherry. So yeah, the interesting connections with Nana Cherry and Massive Attack. Yeah, probably the following week that I bought Blue Lines, or a couple of weeks. When did this come out? I don't know if I bought it exactly the week it came out, but around about then. Actually, this came out slightly before it, so let's do that. Yeah, so these two, one way or the other, I bought in quick succession. Same record store as well. Yeah, so this is a double album. Yeah, great chill out album. Another good Sunday afternoon, just, you know, laying back, drifting away. Because it's a double album, it's rather like, I think I might have said, I was talking about How to Measure a Planet by The Gathering, which is also a double album. Often with these, there's parts of the album that I know better than others because I always tended to fall asleep at certain points in the album. But it opens with little fluffy clouds and ends with a huge ever pulsating brain that rules from the centre of the ultra world, which is 18 minutes long. So this was a double cassette. Now this is quite difficult to track down in terms of, it's not on Spotify, I don't think. And I don't have a copy of it beyond the cassette. So all the times I've listened to it sort of subsequently from its original, or either the original cassette or listening to certain tracks off of it. But I listened to it so fervently between 91 and 2009, which is when effectively I left my cassette collection behind when I moved to Canada. I never got around to rebuying this on CD, and I'm not sure why it's not on Spotify. It might be a label issue. It might be, I don't know, some weird sample clearance issue. Not sure. If anybody out there knows why it's not on Spotify, let me know. I'm assuming someone's uploaded it to YouTube at some point. But the one I do have on CD is their first album. Yeah, so anyway, less said about that the better. Don't want to get into trouble, do we? Yeah, so Guy Pratt plays on this. Is that because he actually did play, or is that because they used a sample? Paul Ferguson. Oh, from Killing Joke. Wow. Okay. I knew Jimmy Coulty was involved. And Alex Patterson. We've got Martin Glover, Youth. Okay, yeah, I did know that Youth was involved with this as well. Because at this point, when this was recorded, he wasn't anything to do with Killing Joke anymore, I don't think. And I know Steve Hillage, he was in a band, I think it was System 7 at this point, along with, I'm sorry, I'm going to mangle a name. Miquette Giraldi. Yeah, Steve Hillage's partner in System 7. Okay. So, yeah. So if you haven't listened to it, just track it down by whatever means, legal means you deem necessary. Because it is worth a listen. And I know you can sort of listen to little fluffy clouds on there. And this is one of this weird thing. I don't know how this happened, because these came out in 1990. There's another band here where I have CD singles of this. So I have a CD single of Little Fluffy Clouds, but I don't ever remember buying it here because I didn't have a CD player. And I didn't have access to anything that would play CDs until, probably 94 or 95 when I bought my first PC, which had a CD player on it. So yeah, not sure when I bought this I was able to get a copy of a CD single of Little Fluffy Clouds like years after it came out. Who knows? Maybe it was sitting in a bargain bin somewhere. Blessed Are the Sick, awesome album. Morbid Angel. I was lucky enough to see them in the 2010s. There was like a weekend metal festival in Halifax. I can't remember exactly when it was in the 2010s, probably early on in the year. 3 days, Friday afternoon, evening, Saturday all day, Sunday all day. Hardly anybody went, or at least there weren't many people there, but Morbid Angel played. I'm pretty sure both Cryptopsy and that other Canadian extreme metal band whose name has just escaped me, I think they played as well. And a few others we saw. I can't remember everybody's name. And there was a lot of local bands earlier on in the day. And we bought tickets for the whole thing, all three days. But hardly anybody went. But got to see Morbid Angel at that point. So that was in 2010s. Yeah, great album. And it's with albums, there are some albums that you can dip into, definitely. I'm a big fan of listening to an album end to end. This album you have to listen to end to end. It really flows nice, and all these sort of connected works that run into each other. These interludes are really interesting as well. But yeah, I love this album. I used to play it a lot when I was walking on the forest. So you go out for how long is the album, does it say? Yeah, 39 minutes. So go out for a 40-minute walk. Also this album, which is a release of a demo album that they did in 1986. I think it's actually produced by David Vincent. But it then came out, I'm not sure whether they were pretty dissatisfied with the results in 86 when it was recorded, and then it suddenly came out, saw the light of day in 91, quite a ways after. So I did actually buy that at the time. I suppose it's not dissimilar to Motorhead and that album On Parole. Think of it that way in some ways, although probably better production than On Parole. And it is interesting to hear some of the versions on here versus some of the versions on here as well. Yeah, classic Morbid Angel lineup there. This is a cool album. So, yeah, it's got, 5 singles on it. I don't know if this was ever released in the UK or not. Yeah. But yeah. Crazy, Killer. There was a version put out. So this got released twice. Once with a sort of more of a Adamski version, and then this version on the album. They're different from one another, I think, at least from what I remember. So yeah, and played this album to death. Just love this album, and also what's really cool about it is at that point I was buying quite a lot of music VHSs, and there's a really good live gig sometime between this album, or around the time this album and the second album. I'm not sure exactly when it is or when I bought it, which is a Seal Live album, and I don't have it in front of me. I don't have it anywhere to hand, actually. And I can never remember if it's live in France or live in Dublin. but he has an awesome guitarist playing with him, which makes it even more rocky versions that are on here. Yeah. From Beyond, Massacre. Played this a lot, so there's a connection between this band and the band Death. We'll probably talk about Death towards the end. Not Death, but the Death, the band. And there was a lot of volatility in Death around the time that this was recorded, because this actually features members who had previously at some point, either jointly or individually, been in Death. But also Massacre existed as a band alongside early Death. This album came about really as the band reforming, Massacre reforming, because of an issue that had happened when some of the band members who had most recently been in Death, there was a big schism in the band when Chuck Schuldiner refused to tour, and the band carried on without him, with someone standing in. I can't remember who stood in at the time, and then they did that because the other members were worried that they'd be on the hook for money as a result of them not fulfilling tour commitments. So yeah. So we'll have a look up at the lineup of Death on the timeline when I get through to that album. So what happened was, because I'd listened to some earlier Death albums, I was aware of everything that had gone on, and then the connection to Massacre, and so bought this when it came out. Yeah, Metallica Black Album. This is one I can't remember where I bought it, but I do remember one Sunday when I was driving down to Brighton usually when I used to drive down to Brighton, I'd always go sort of, I suppose you could call it the back road. So there's a road that connects where I used to live in a place called Forest Row to Brighton. It sort of runs off from, there's a road called the A22 which runs down to Eastbourne, which is the main, goes from London to Eastbourne and through a lot of places like East Grinstead, and Nutley and Uckfield and places like that, and Forest Row, where I grew up. And and then all the way down to Eastbourne. Well, off of that road, there's another side road that runs down to Brighton. And then there's a third road, the A23, which runs from Crawley to Brighton, but also goes up to London, I suppose, because it eventually comes the M23. And then you can get to the M25, or you can carry on to the M23, which goes back to the A23, and so on. So there's this, dual carriageway, like major route down to Brighton from Crawley. And for some reason, instead of taking the slightly more picturesque route that we would usually go, we went down down this main road, and I just have this remember us driving down there with this album blaring, and that's probably why I can remember it, because I didn't normally used to go that way down, but normally the only reason I'd go down the A23 is if I was already on the M23 coming back from Crawley or somewhere like that, or from a job or whatever in later years, or coming back from college in Red Hill, and I needed to get down to Brighton for some reason. So but at the time, great album for listening while you're driving somewhere. It's quite a long album, so we probably listened to half of it on the way down, half of it on the way back. Another one where I got really obsessed at the time in the band, had the t-shirt with the Pushead style t-shirt, and was watching the documentary, was like devouring stuff by the band. I'd previously been into them since about the time of Ride the Lightning, and then sort of infilled backwards and bought the first album and various other albums. But there's a really cool, video documentary type thing surrounding recording of the album. And I was really interested in a lot of that stuff at the time. So I remember buying that. And then also in the 90s, I think it was still the, was it? Yeah, it would be might have been the late 80s. I'm trying to remember when Pump by Aerosmith came out. But whenever that came out, they produced a video about the studio work of the album at the time. So I was really into those sort of videos, which were a combination of like performances in the studio and discussions with the band and the producer and various other things that sort of took a bit of a peek inside of the the record production process. So yeah, I was buying several of those videos and quite a few like live VHSs as well at the time, and music tuitional videos and various other things. So yeah. And of course, every cover band that I say every cover band, but a lot of cover bands that I went to see at the 101 Club around that time were playing Enter Sandman as one of their covers. Okay, so grunge. We got 3 albums here that I wanted to just talk about first. So 10. This was probably the first album that I bought by a grunge band, and played it a lot. But it's funny with this album, and I was umming and ahhing whether to leave it in, because I did listen to it the other day, but I would say out of the 3 I'm going to talk about, it's probably over time the least listened to album, although when I bought it, I played it a lot. But then I saw the film Singles, which is a great film. So if you've never seen Singles, worth watching. There's loads of cameo roles in it by various members of Pearl Jam and Soundgarden. And I bought this album, and I bought the Mother Love Bone stuff, and then there was another album that the members released as well associated with that. And then I heard the track State of Love and Trust off of Singles, and I just could not stop playing it. I went out and bought the Singles soundtrack, and I got distracted by that. And I don't know, once I heard that track, I don't know what it was, it just spoiled everything else. I don't know why. But I still love stuff on here like Alive, and I remember I've got, around that time I was buying lots of t-shirts of the band, and I've actually, my Pearl Jam t-shirt, my Alive t-shirt, and my long sleeve are one of the few t-shirts I've still got from that period. Everything else has long fallen apart. I don't even have my Soundgarden Bad Motorfinger t-shirt actually, but for some reason my both the t-shirt, the Alive t-shirt and the Alive long sleeve, which both have slightly different band the band logo is in slightly different colours, and I often use the long sleeve as like it's quite baggy on me now. I often use it as a winter night shirt, basically. So it makes me smile thinking about that. So yeah, God, the amount of money I used to spend at the time on, cassettes, because I was still buying cassettes then, t-shirts and videos, and possibly the odds. Or maybe I'm trying to think what I would have had then. So I would have I wouldn't have had a PC, but I did have a games machine, like a Nintendo. But I don't think I was buying cartridges at that point. I think that was I got that out of my system by then. Yeah, but I was definitely buying a few tuitional videos. Yeah, so moving on. So yeah, played it a lot of the time, but that fell off a little bit. But I do still play it today, and I do have a copy of it, I believe, on CD. Never mind, this is interesting. So at the time, my youngest brother was listening to this incessantly, over and over and over again, so much so I really got sick of it, but I couldn't help but listen to it because he was playing it all the time on repeat, alongside early Soundgarden stuff and some like UK rock dance music bands as well that he was into, and sort of acid house, and a real interesting mixture of grunge, acid house stuff, and sort of UK rock stroke dance bands. So I knew the album in and out without ever purchasing. Then I actually did buy it and played it to death again, and I still play it now. Yeah, there's awesome stuff on here. Interesting, isn't it, the build up of the sales? But yeah, it's funny, isn't it, when you often listen to an album ambiently, there's always a danger that you can just get sick of it, and that I did come dangerously close to that. Well, yeah, I mean, I did get sick of it, but I couldn't avoid it, and then I had a break of about a couple of months, I think, and then went out and bought a copy and got back into it. Yeah, I remember this track as well. I did learn how to play one of the other ones. I can't remember which one it was. Yeah. It wasn't two of these tracks. I don't know if it was In Bloom or Breed. Yeah, not sure. Which was the one that they got into trouble with Killing Joke about? Was it this one? Yeah, 80s. Yeah, the riff. Yeah. I did learn how to play quite a number of these, but I only jammed with somebody with a band on one, and I just can't remember. It was one of the deeper tracks. Yeah. Out of the three, this is my favourite, I reckon, today. And at the time of the three bands, this was my favourite band. And there was that big hit with Jesus Christ Pose. But the other thing that obsessed me a little bit were all the alternate tunings. I remember buying the tab to this and just being amazed at the alternate tunings on here. It's something as well, I think, that came up. Doesn't Pump use? The Aerosmith album used some interesting tunings as well, I think. Yeah. So yeah, unusual time signatures, interesting tunings. Isn't it the case that when they toured, the amount of guitars that they had to use was phenomenal because of all the different alternate tunings, I think? Oh, that one. Every string is tuned to one of several octaves of E. There's that's not a new thing. I mean, I think in another instance, there's tuning all of the strings to A in different octaves. It's interesting once you start using a slide on there. It gives you this really distinctive sound. Yeah. And the other thing, I have a nice sort of post, and I remember I was saying, alongside Little Fluffy Clouds, I owned, or still do, I own the CD single to this, to Jesus Christ Pose. And I don't know why, because I didn't have a CD player when it came out. So I wonder if I was raiding the bargain bin somewhere and Little Fluffy Clouds and Jesus Christ Pose are in there. But I have the CD single to Jesus Christ Pose. It's got an interesting cover on there. There's a cover of Into the Void by Sabbath, originally by Black Sabbath. Yeah. But yeah, I have the CD single to that. And I got this wonderful memory again on it. It was a Sunday afternoon. This time round, what it was is that I had some friends from way back when I was a teenager. And, when I was growing up, sort of in my mid to late teens, we used to hang out a lot on Ashdown Forest, and I'd go around their place on a Sunday. And we kept in touch after we sort of left school, and we went to different schools actually, but we met outside of school on the forest, and then I used to go down to their place on a Sunday afternoon, listen to music, listen to Queen and Rush and Kiss, Destroyer, and anyway, we kept in touch all through sort of various years. They went away to college, I went out to work. We used to bump into each other down the local pub, and often, we'd meet up when they came back, when anybody was away for a period of time, and they'd often phone me. It was two brothers basically, and one of them in particular would phone me up and say, "Oh, I'm going out for a walk on the forest. You fancy coming out for a walk and a chat?" So one Sunday they phoned me up and he said, "Oh, we're both down this weekend. Do you want to go out for a drive? And we'll go out for afternoon lunch somewhere." We went to somewhere like a, I can't remember what they're called, not like a beef eater, but something similar, like a chain place where you could get, like a proper meal as opposed to just a sort of burger. So yeah, we went there, hung out, had a chat. So I drove there. They picked me up. We drove there and they drove back. And it was a Sunday afternoon, and on a Sunday afternoon in the UK, it's a bit of an institution really. We always used to listen to the Sunday Rundown. That was no exception. So we're in the car listening to Sunday Rundown. It's a lovely sort of sunny October. I think was when did the single come out? So it doesn't say actually. Yeah, so it was. I'm pretty sure it was later in the year, but I can't remember for sure because I don't remember it being super hot. But I could be wrong. But it was definitely in the chart rundown, and this got played. We turned it up and started talking about Soundgarden and how cool they were. So yeah, nice memories of that. And then Human by Death. So this is October time. I'd already listened to Spiritual Healing and Leprosy. Now Leprosy, did that have... So you can see here we've got Rick Ross, Bill Andrews, Terry Butler with Chuck Schnolder in the band. We get on to Spiritual Healing, and this is the version with James Murphy in. So one of the guitarists leaves, and then the other two are still in the band. James Murphy joins. I'm a really big James Murphy fan. I love the way he plays. His work on Obituary. He was also on a Cancer album, I think, probably the first album, whose cover I better not bring up actually. But I think here in this episode, it's the second album that was released this year. So yeah, I've got real fond memories of this album. So I basically started getting into this band around this time and was systematically buying the albums as they came out. And this album, you probably noticed there's a major change in the lineup. So that was when there was that big issue between the previous album and this album, when they'd gone on tour at some point, sort of before Human, and effectively Chuck Schnolder had abandoned the tour for various reasons, and the remaining members, so prior to this album, So this is prior to that, so sometime around here. So let's do this. Sorry, yeah, the remaining members, and I'm not sure even if James Murphy was playing on the tour or not. We'll look at the timeline in a moment. The remaining members carried on with the tour. So we get on to Human, which came out this year, and I'm aware of all this volatility, and now the band is featuring members of a band called Cynic, who were around at that time. So it was Chuck with backing band now that comprised of members of Cynic, and they carried on. And then the Cynic album was released a little bit later, which I then went on to buy, but more in the CD era, and that was Focus, which came out in 93. So yeah, we'll talk about that when we get to 93 in this, because in this series I'm flip-flopping back between both ends of the year. So I started off with 99, went to 1990, then to 98, now we're on 91. So the next video I do on this, whenever I do it, it's going to be 97 and so on. So we'll get to 93 eventually and end up in the middle. Yeah, so where are we? I'm jumping around a lot and confusing everybody. But yeah, 91 was the album from that year, and I played this to death, excuse the pun. So this is a pivotal release in the development of technical death metal. No doubt we'll see other albums. There were a lot of pivotal releases this year in the development of various subgenres of extreme music. Okay, so let's have an overview of the year as a whole here. Just go through in order and see, and I'll talk around a few things. So yeah, first release by Dark Throne. Still playing death metal at that point. I did listen to this the other day. It's a pretty good album actually, by death metal standards. It's interesting to hear what's going on in Europe. Well, we've got sort of this. This is a Norwegian band, if you're not familiar with Dark Throne, but there's a lot of Swedish death metal bands as well at that time who recorded some fairly pivotal albums. We've got 1916 by Motorhead, final album to feature Phil Filthy Animal Taylor. At this point they've got two guitarists, I'm assuming. I'm not too familiar with this incarnation of Motorhead, I must admit. Wizzo Campbell and Wurzel in the band at that point. Oh yeah, and there's a cello on 1916. Little Ain't Enough. Oh yeah, Jason Becker played on that. That's right. He certainly had a good run of hired hands, didn't he? Divinals, Australian band. So I always think to them similar to In Excess, like we're doing really well in Australia for a number of years. No one really knew of them outside Australia, but big in Australia. And then suddenly there was an influx of Australian bands hitting big in the UK. And I know that was true of In X, and from what I remember, as long as I haven't got this wrong, I'm pretty sure that was true of Divinals as well. Doubt by Jesus Jones, second album. So there's a lot of these, like crossover dance rock bands in the UK. So we're sort of at the tail end of the Manchester scene. Britpop hadn't really started. We've got shoegaze, and then we've got things like something called baggy, which is these bands that sort of draw from psychedelia, dance music, rock. Northern UK's Manchester scene as well coming out. So we'll probably see some other bands from that era, or we will do, mentioned here. Yeah, Innuendo by Queen. So their last album recorded released while Freddie was still alive, although didn't seem very long between when this was released and when he sadly passed away. So I bought this when it came out. Rather prophetic track, and probably one of my favourite Queen songs actually. Show Must Go On. Yeah. Yeah. Original LP, 48 minutes, 53. Had that on cassette. Played it quite a bit walking on Ashdown Forest. Solid Ball of Rock, Saxon were on there on their 10th album. I did see them live in about 90... No, sorry. Start again. I saw them live in about 87. 86, 87. At Brighton. The Dome. Yeah, the Dome in Brighton. Very nearly, actually, we got crushed. So yeah, the venue then had seats, and previous to that, what had I seen there? I'd seen Big Country, and then I went to see Saxon, and went to see UFO as well down there as well, actually. And at Saxon, a lot of people was like standing on the seats. And the only way you could see the band was by standing on the seats. And then it's sort of the crowd moved and I went down, and luckily someone grabbed me. But, I was sort of went under a load of people. And so, yeah, that was quite scary. So next time I went to see a band there, I was with a friend and we went to see The Cult, who by then had acquired quite a large metal following, because they were starting to sound a bit more like AC/DC. And so I looked round and I could tell that the audience demographic had changed quite a bit, and I thought, yeah, a lot of people are going to get up and be standing on their seats. And so I said to my friend, yeah, I think we probably want to just stand in the walkways at the side of our seats. And sure enough, everybody got up on the chairs and they were swaying around. It's pretty unstable when people are standing on seats. So yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, too old for that shit. So yeah, you've got bands like Tad, who I wasn't really listening to. So there's quite a number of bands that were in this time that have connections, because either they were inspiring to, or new, or were sort of had some connections to the scene in terms of grunge. So we've got bands like Tad. So a lot of these American alternative bands, you have bands like Dinosaur Jr. They're on their 4th studio album by then. And the other thing I find really relaxing is listening to Jay Mascis being interviewed. Like, if you ever want to chill out, yeah, just listen to him being interviewed, because he's so chill and laid back. So yeah, I particularly like it when he does things like rig rundowns or anything like that. But I hadn't really listened to much Dinosaur Jr. But I have recently. But it's one of those bands where I think, yeah, I should listen to more. Hooked by Great White. I wasn't really keeping up with them. I think I was, they're about 3 albums. I don't know how many albums they're in by now. But yeah, I've got 1 album by them, I think. Oh yeah, this I really enjoyed, this album. So I can never remember whether I onboarded through this album or the following album, Gorgeous, but 2 of the albums I listened to. And again, yeah, interesting UK music scene going on here. You've got like acid house, techno, all these sort of meetings of different styles. They also used to have guest vocalists on, and I think I read an article in an electronic magazine about electronic music where they said what they did is, if they would listen to a piece of music and really like the sound, like where they could have used the sample, instead of doing the sample, they would redo that on synths, basically. So that way they didn't have to get samples cleared, and also it gave it a slightly different feel as well. So yeah, I think they were the band I was reading about that did that. But they did still use samples for some things. But yeah, there was lots of like clearance nightmares at that time where I think it was either the KLF or I think it was the KLF who ran into real problems getting clearance on an album. So White Room, yeah, there was several classic chill out albums in this period, of which this is one, I think. Yeah, some of these things are difficult to get on streaming platforms, which is annoying because it's really worthwhile listening to that album. Out of time. I know the singles off this, but I've never really listened to it properly. Probably somebody I knew may have had a copy of it. We probably listened to bits of it in the car. It had Shiny Happy People and Losing My Religion, radio song, singles. Another band who I think, influenced a lot of alternative bands at the time. So they're on their 7th album by this point. And this is when they went from a cult status to a massive international act. Godfathers, yeah, I don't know what track by them I remember. I was trying to think who I knew that was in them. There was somebody, yeah. Maybe I'm confusing them with another band. I've only ever heard about one track by them. Yeah, Love Secret Domain. What can you say about Coil? Definitely worth checking out. They can be quite a challenging listening. Some of their stuff is very much in that sort of Ilbiant vein. So if you're familiar with people like Lustmord, maybe, some of it's like that. But they do a lot of loop and sample stuff. And this is a really good album, actually, although it's, obviously a little bit unsettling to listen to just sound-wise. And the whole circumstances that where it was produced were under very weird things. Yeah, so sleep deprivation and drug use and God knows what else. So, yeah, influenced by the acid house scene at the time. But it's quite accurate here, actually, less explicitly indebted to the dance style and the work of Psychic TV, because Psychic TV and Throbbing Gristle were pretty early to the party in terms of acid house music. And so I'm not sure if this was Coil's first sort of inroad into that, but they were, a little bit behind the curve, but it's really interesting listening. And I'm trying to remember the track I really like on this. I was listening to it while I was out walking this week, because prior to this I'd not listened to that album in particular. Gothic by Paradise Lost. This album has probably launched so many other bands. Yeah, so part of many genre twists and turns that Paradise Lost have taken over the years. And that's true of those 3 bands on the Peaceville label. The bands I'm thinking of are Paradise Lost, My Dying Bride, Anathema. And Paradise Lost are probably the earliest band. So they had an album out in 1990 out of the Death Doom UK staple on Peaceville, the Peaceville 3, I think, as they're called. These were the first this was the first band to have an album out. Lost Paradise was the first album, 1990. 1991, we have this album. Very interesting melodically. Lots of really interesting twists and turns on the guitar melodies. And you can definitely hear how they went on to influence other bands that sort of adopted a similar style. Either, stuff that was absorbed into the melodic death metal scene, particularly Northern Europe, Scandinavian scene, but also gothic metal in general. So yeah, well worth checking out. I have this on vinyl, and I was trying to think out of the Peaceville 3. The first band I got into would have been My Dying Bride in about 96, 97. Bought that and then bought Paradise Lost album 1 Second. That came out in 97. I bought that when it came out. So those two bands were the first bands I got into, and then I infilled in 97, 98, bought all their earlier stuff, and then Anathema I didn't get until a little bit later, not much later, until Judgment came out, and then did the same with them, like infilled. So I've got most, if not all, of the early, Paradise Lost, My Dying Bride, Anathema stuff from like, late 90s backwards. And in the case of Paradise Lost, My Dying Bride, going forward as well a bit. I think they were the one that I kept up buying albums from for a while, past like the 2000s, and then some of the Anathema stuff as well, but I didn't really keep up too much with Paradise Lost. But yeah, cool album, but a bit of an unusual listen actually. Some things sound similar. I've never heard an album that sounds exactly the same as that. Interesting guitar tones on it. Joyride by Roxette, third album, sorry. Yeah, I always make that mistake. Yeah, because their first album was Pearls of Passion, I think. Yeah, which I've never listened to. I onboarded with them around here. And I have another memory of me buying a Roxette album. I think it was this one. Pretty sure. Couldn't have been, yeah. Timeline's wrong for that, actually, thinking about what else I was doing. When I bumped into an old friend in a W.H. Smith's in East Grinstead, I'd gone up there one lunchtime. I always used to do like album buying on a Friday. I'd just buy a cassette every Friday, pretty much without fail, drive into the town centre during my lunch break, and then basically go back on a Friday. And I was buying a Roxette album, I remember, so it must have been this one. And I bumped into them. I hadn't seen them for like 3 or 4 years, I think, since it's like 87. So yeah, it's funny how albums make you think of things like that, or make me think of things like that. Right, back you go. Joyride, Human Factor. Listened to that a lot of the time. Didn't really follow the band up much. I was aware of one of their tracks off of, I don't know if it was The Dark or the debut, was featured momentarily on, was it Metal? I'm trying to remember that. Those series of documentaries which have, yeah, it's just come to me, but I can't remember exactly. But their music was used momentarily at the start of it, and it would probably be, yeah, I can't remember now. It's the one where they interview a lot of people. So it's the second of a series of videos. Is it Pam Sferris, the director? And the second one is on the LA scene. And they get, most of it is glam bands, but early on they interview Motorhead, I think. But early on in the film, for some reason they play a metal church track. Although I don't know if they ever interview the band, because most of the people they interview are members of bands from LA, and as consequently most of them are glam metal bands. I think there's an interview with Metallica towards the end, maybe, here and there. So there's other sort of non-glam bands dotted around in the stuff. Yeah. Anyway, I can't remember the name of the thing. It'll probably come to me at some point later on. Suddenly bounced into my head. Yeah, and this album as well, Mr. Big Lean Into It. I think I preferred the debut album. I mainly knew them because I was really into Paul Gilbert. So yeah, I was a big fan of all the sort of what they disparagingly called shredders at the time. Yeah. Spiderland by Slint. Yeah, famous album in the sort of genetics of post-rock, alongside things like by Talk Talk, which we'll see in a moment, and yeah, Hex by Bark Psychosis, which Bark Psychosis didn't come out that year, but yeah, often spoken about when you're talking about the early days of post-rock. Arise by Sepultura, I've already mentioned. Main Attraction by White Line. I don't own this one. I own the two previous. Combination of getting into this band, I heard Wait, which I think is on the second album, on the Friday Rock Show. And then within about a week, one of my friends came back from France. They were riding in France. They were cyclists. And they came back for a break and were waxing lyrically about White Line. I think it was the second album at the time. And so we're playing that, so I got to listen to the rest of the album and ended up going out and buying that album and then the following one, but didn't keep up the attention to the fourth. Good guitarist in, I mean, they're a good band, and the guitarist is, yeah, Vito Bratta. Yeah, a number of glam bands at the time had awesome shredders, like really good guitarists. Main Attraction, Blue Lines I've already mentioned. True Love, yeah, I wasn't really keeping up with Pat Benatar at this time. The last album I bought by her was Wide Awake in Dreamland, I think it's called. I mentioned this. This is the debut Alanis Morissette album, so just to put you on the timeline, there you go. 95 was Jagged Little Pill. We will be talking about that at some point. Chris Rea, same friend that we used to listen to White Line together. Two other bands I always remember he played. So every time he came back after being away for a while, there would be, who have you been listening to? And it would be like, that time was White Lion. Another time it was Surfing with the Alien, Joe Satriani. And then another time it was the Chris Rea album with Road to Hell on it. So it's just reminded me of Chris, that album. Where did I go? Oh, there we go. I don't know what's on this album, actually. I know this was a big single, wasn't it? Oh, there you go, Road to Hell 89. So, yeah. I think it was a live album as well, but I don't know when it was. Which he used to play a lot. Temple of the Dog. Yeah. Tribute. Members of Soundgarden and Pearl Jam, I think. Don't know who else is in the band. So yeah, I bought that at the time, and the Mother Love Bone album as well that was released at some point. Fishbone, didn't really listen to them. Okay, yeah, Chapter House. So sadly at the time I completely missed out on shoegaze, bar one band. I don't think the album's going to be mentioned here, or actually stepped on momentarily to shoegaze, which was the band Lush, but I don't think it came out this year. Spooky by Lush was the album I'm thinking of. But there is another shoegaze band, which I'll get onto in a moment, who, when I finally did get around to listening to them, I absolutely obsessed over, and still do to this day. But the reason why the album by them from this year doesn't make the list is because I didn't listen to them until well into the 2000s, after they'd packed up, so I didn't really include it up here. Spartacus by The Farm has that single on it that borrows the Altogether Now single borrows was it Canon? What's it called? Damn it. Yeah, Veggie Canon. That's a cool progression to learn, actually, that chord progression. Is it circle of... I never remember whether it's circle of fifths or circle of fourths, but anyway, yeah. Cool progression to learn. Young Gods. What were they up to by this time? It's a cover album. Okay. Yeah, already mentioned that. Melvin's Bullhead. So another band, very influential rock band, alternative band that influenced other bands that sprung up in this time period. There's this weird Dred Zeppelin band. I never really listened to them that much. So they had a guy that was a sort of Elvis impersonator, and they did Led Zeppelin songs in the style of reggae. Yeah. Consolidated, didn't really listen to them until I listened to one track off of an industrial metal compilation, interestingly enough. Yeah, well worth a listen. Yeah. Sherbet Dipped by Your Mouth. Did that had Unbelievable on them. One of my brothers was playing this a lot. And did a song. God, followed by an Atomic Dustbin. I got into this band just on this album, that's all. I was obsessed by them a little bit because they had two bass players. And I'd seen them on Top of the Pops, and they were part of this Grebo movement, which was a sort of weird subculture. You know, the music was influenced by alternative rock and punk rock, dance, hip-hop, psychedelia. They looked a bit like Krusties to look at, you know, in terms of the way they dressed. So there's also a little bit of slacker grunge look as well. So suited the aesthetic at the time. And you've got all these like UK bands that are playing slightly different variations on a theme with lots of different influences of music, but have lots of different fashion styles. So you've got a lot of the Manchester bands and the dance bands have got that very much sort of sports casual look, you know, with the tracksuit tops and things like that. And then you've got bands like Ned's Atomic Dustbin and other bands, a bit more sort of grungy, slackery look, a bit more crusty. So yeah. Primus album, second album. I only listened to them once and I can't remember which album it was. But yeah, I was on a road trip probably, a couple of years later. It was whatever year that... I can't remember the name of the Suicidal Tendencies album. The Art of Something, it's called. And also there was an album by Black Sabbath which had where Dio came back on. I think it had, was it Computer God on it? I can't remember the name of the album. So that had come out, the Suicidal Tendencies album and a Primus album, and we played all three of them on the way down and back to Brighton. I was with a couple of other friends, one of them same person I mentioned I used to work with when I was talking about the listening to Arise, and it was a friend of his, so we wasn't really keeping up with Halloween. Oh yeah, cool album. This is interesting. So this is electronic, Bernard Sumner from New Order, Joy Division, and Johnny Marr from the Smiths, and also the two guys from Pet Shop Boys are involved in some of the tracks as well. But I didn't buy this till a lot later. But yeah, it's a good album. Debut by the Smashing Pumpkins. Didn't buy, like a lot of stuff, didn't listen to this in a similar way that I didn't listen to the first album by Nirvana until, little whiles after I'd listened to other stuff. So yeah, this is Dismember's debut album, Like an Ever-Flowing Stream. Yeah, Swedish death metal, which was definitely in the ascendancy at that time, but I hadn't got into at that point. I was into more the American side, and I wasn't really aware quite so much, I suppose, of sort of Northern Europe, Swedish stuff. So that came a lot later, probably via bands like At the Gates, and I suppose to some degree Arch Enemy, I suppose. I need to listen to this album. I listened to a couple of tracks of it and it sounded really good. I've listened to I have one Swans album. Is it Soundtracks for the Deaf or something like that? It's a double album from '96, I think it is. And that's the first time I listened to anything by them. And I started to listen to this, and yeah, I'm definitely interested in this band. What do they say? Psychedelic. Sounded a bit neo-folky to me, but anyway, I'll see when I listen to it. Deacon Blue, didn't really keep up with them. They had that one hit, what was it called? Nothing Ever Changes. There's a band local band I was sort of familiar with. I knew the band members, and a lot of them were friends with the person that I used to go down to Brighton with, that I worked with, and they were friendly with a listings magazine that was self-produced called 5D, I think, like a DIY listings magazine for local gigs and other things, and album reviews. And they used to play a cover of Nothing Ever Matters. I think that's what it's called. Where's it gone? Is that the one? Interesting. Have I got the right band? Maybe I'm thinking of the wrong band. It's possible. So greatest hits, it's got to be on this. Okay. Must be thinking of someone else then. Okay. I must have got muddled up. Must be thinking of another band. Now I'm really curious. So Deacon Blue. Discography. Singles. Closing time. No. Okay. Okay, I've gone down the wrong rabbit hole here, unless I've got the song title wrong. Yeah, it must be another band that were in a similar style. Yeah. I remember this being a big... I mean, I remember these hits like Real Gone Kid, Dignity, yeah, but the track I'm thinking of must be by another band, probably with a similar name. And of course, when I think of Deacon Blue, that's a reference to a track of another band on an album, isn't it? Oh God, yeah. Anyway, I can't remember everything, I suppose. Right? Does it actually say the reference to their? Oh yeah, the Steely Dan Deacon Blues. That's what I was trying to think of as well. Okay. Anyway. Slow Deep High by Tycho. Was that the debut album? Yeah. Didn't get into them until around about time of just after October Rust, and then infield a load of their stuff. So yeah, bait later, like 96, 97. Slave to the Grind, Skid Row. There's somebody else at work who's big into Skid Row. I think they liked the combination of Skid Row. What's the other band? Love Hate, I think they were called, who came out I think a little bit later. And yeah, there was somebody else that they used to obsess about as well. Guns N' Roses, that was it. Yeah, another one of these indie rock bands from Manchester. Yeah, Manchester indie rock, Baggy. Yeah, you can downloads of Interesting Rabbit Hole. Love Hurts by Cher. Okay. Oh, the Shoop Shoop song. This is an interesting rarities album. The only reason I bought it was basically because it had, for the certain covers. So they did Protest and Survive, Sex by Trust, Part 9 by the Chantilly's, and the Bring the Noise thing. So. But I did have a copy of that. Hollywood Vampires by LA Guns. Yeah, and band with a Guns N' Roses connection through Tracy Guns. Yeah. So, another interesting rabbit hole to go down. So this, I always think this is the first album I heard. No, it's the second album. So Solace. I do have this on CD, but I didn't get into her until a lot later. So around about 2000s, I got into a bit of I sort of occasionally get into these female singer-songwriter jags. And at this, around the time of, it's quite a while after Surfacing in the 2000s, but I heard Surfacing, bought it, loved it, bought Fumbling Towards Ecstasy, bought some Fiona Apple stuff. I can't remember the other artist, was it someone Nova, and a couple of others, and then listened to it a lot in the 2000s. Sort of forgot about it through social media and music blogging. Met someone who went on to ultimately became my wife, and in the early days of the relationship, rediscovered Sarah McLachlan through this album, which we were both playing at the time, and I'd forgotten I bought it, so I bought another copy of it. So then I realised, and then when I came over on an early visit, I said, I have this album by Sarah McLachlan, Surfacing. Do you have a copy? And they said no. So I thought, okay, well, would you like a copy then? Because you can have, I've got these dual copies, so I gave them my copy. So because this would have been before that, in the 2000s, but before streaming. So you had to sort of digitize stuff to get it on your player. So we both had sort of music players. I think I had an Archess at that point, and I think my wife to be, she had a iPod probably. Yeah, I've been through them all. I had an Archess, I had a Microsoft Zune, which I really loved. I really loved the Wi-Fi syncing you could do on it. And then when that wore out, I bought and it like an original iPod, not an iPod Touch. I did have an iPod Touch, but I bought an iPod like 120 gig one, or maybe it's 160, really big one, which I still have now actually, because when I bought it, just after I bought it, I got streaming was a thing anyway, but I bought it because I just wanted to be able to play all my old CDs, which weren't all available on streaming. And but what happened was that then, the iPad started to appear, and iPod Touch, and so I started to use those more in combination with my Spotify account, and so I wasn't using the iPod quite so much as stuff was coming onto Spotify. But I've started listening to it again now. In fact, when I go out every morning for my walk, I always choose my old classic iPod over everything else, and it's great. I'm listening to some old albums I haven't listened to for a long while, including stuff that I bought from that I rebought, that I originally bought in 1991. So yeah, it's cool. So I do need to re-listen to Solace. Did I call it Solstice? I meant to say Solace. Yowza. So much stuff here. Yeah, Hey Stupid by Alice Cooper. Did buy this. Much prefer his earlier stuff though. So the really early stuff, and was it a couple of albums back? I really like that album. Raise Your Fist. So I have this, I have Trash, I have Hey Stupid, or had them on cassette. This has got this on and Feed My Frankenstein. Also Joe Satriani, Steve Vai. Loads of Hard Hands. Lucky enough to see Alice Cooper in the 2000s when they did they were part of a his band and several other bands were part of this thing called Monsters of Rock on Tour, I think it was called, something like that. They played, I'm trying to remember, there's about 5 bands played. So one year there was Alice Cooper headlining, year or a couple of years later Whitesnake headlined. But yeah, it's a cool gig. Did the full stage show and everything. Can't remember what album had come out prior to that. I think there's quite a lot of stuff off, is it Dragon Town? That rings a bell. Oh, okay, soundtrack from that. I forgot that was out that year. We'll be talking about some cinema stuff. Boys in the Hood. Quite a lot of this stuff I ended up watching a few years later on video through rental. Woodface, didn't listen to it at the time, but I can remember like a lot of people in bands talking about Crowded House. I've got these 2 albums, Together Alone and Woodface. And I think I bought this first, but a little bit later because I've got them on CD. I never had them on cassette, I don't think. I think that might be right. And I was aware of their connection to Split Enz. Yeah. So Neil Finn and Tim Finn. So I knew about them. James album. Where are we? Do we squeeze? Yeah, we weren't really keeping up with them. Slave State by Godflesh. 2nd EP. Street Cleaner was their debut album. Yeah. Very heavy. I was always fascinated by the gear they were using as well. Because they're using like drum machines. And they're pretty heavy as well. Justin Broderick was in an early lineup of Napalm Death. He's plays on half of the Scum album, which I have. And then didn't he go on to form... What was the band after that? So we've got... Fall of Because, Napalm Death, Head of David, Godflesh, Yezu. Yeah, definitely an artist that's worth checking out actually. But I didn't on board with this band until quite late on there. Yeah, that album, but not until 97. It was on an end of year list for 96 for Terrorizer. So I bought that album and then I bought that the following year from when it came out. Miranda Sex Garden. So there's a band that they spun off called Medieval Babes, who I actually saw live in the 2000s. So yeah, they do all this sort of medieval inspired choral stuff. But yeah, that's several members of Medieval Babes that were in Miranda Sex Garden. So, yeah, Black Album by Metallica, already mentioned that. Cypress Hill debut. Didn't really start listening to them around the time of Temples of Boom, the sort of darker stuff, really. Mr. Bungle, I was aware of, was it Mike Patton? Because of when he joined Faith No More, who I was already into, and I was aware he had this band called Mr. Bungle, who were pretty experimental, but didn't really listen to them that much. I think at some point, didn't the guy from Slayer, Dave Lombardo, play drums for the band? Spin Doctors, this has got, is it called what? 2 Princes on it. So that's how I know that. But I don't own the album. Leisure debut album by Blur. So yeah, early album by what went on to be a major Britpop band. So yeah, you can see pretty interesting musical waters in the UK at that time. 10 by Pearl Jam. Okay, I'd love to talk a bit about Slowdive, but the reason why I'm not going to talk a lot about them is I'm going to do a follow-up episode about how I got into Slowdive. But suffice to say, I didn't get into them until after their first split, around the 2000s. I ended up going down a sort of genre exploration rabbit hole, and shoegaze was one of those. And in the follow-up episode I'm going to do on Slowdive, I'll explain how I ended up going down a shoegaze rabbit hole about 10 years after I should have gone down it. After sort of skating close to the edge, but then for some reason not. Probably, yeah, there's various reasons why that was the case, one of which was just lack of disposable income at a certain point. So, and you know, from going from having too many bands that I needed to be into and having enough money to having too many bands that I needed to be into and not having enough money from about 93 through to about 94, 95 maybe. So I didn't pick up on them in 91 because I was distracted by other stuff, and then yeah, I just stayed unaware of the whole scene that celebrates itself. Yeah, Roll the Bones by Rush. I just remember this because having a discussion with one of my work colleagues, different one, about Rush at that time, and I think we were mentioning what albums. In fact, he may have even left the firm at that by then, and I bumped into him in a car park somewhere, I suspect, and we sort of caught up with one another. And he said, "Oh, what Rush albums are you listening to recently? Have you listened to Roll the Bones?" And I said, "No, not because I think by 91, I don't think he was at the firm anymore. Because I remember, yeah, I'm just trying to even remember if he worked for me when I was running the lab or not. Don't think he did. I think he'd gone by then." Oh, this is a good album. And I bought it because mainly because it's got this on it. So I had Invasion of Your Privacy, and then, which is most of my favourite tracks on here are off of that album. But it's got the one from the Point Break soundtrack. It's the one at the end where I think it pans away when, is it Bodhi persuades the character played by, oh God, I should know his name. The John Wick guy. Yeah, anyway, him, that fella. Bill and Ted. Keanu Reeves. The Keanu Reeves lets him go out for one last ride of this wave. And then in the closing credits, they play that track. So, yeah. Blow Up, Smithereens. I'm only familiar with them through the track Behind the Wall of Sleep. Can't remember what album it's off of. I don't know when this came out in the US or the UK. That's Screw It by Danger Danger. I did have that album cassette. Laughing Stock, last album by Talk Talk. So they'd definitely gone very post-rock by this point, sorry. But Spirit of Eden is when that first sort of happened. And I've listened to these albums retrospectively. I did listen to their early stuff a little bit. Okay, Use Your Illusion 1 and 2. So, yeah, I mean, I bought these albums. But I must admit, to me, there's a lot of filler. At least to my ears. And I love the good stuff, or the stuff that doesn't feel like it's filler. So Live and Let Die, I really like the cover. November Rain, Don't Cry. Same with the second album, but I never played them, apart from a few listen throughs, several times. Yeah, they didn't maintain my sort of attention. In fact, this one doesn't have different lyrics to Don't Cry yet. So, Yeah, Knocking on Heaven Door, 14 Years, Civil War. I can't remember if this has got the better tracks on it or not. Maybe. But yeah, didn't hold my attention. Yeah, You Could Be Mine. So No More Tears. One again I listened to more ambiently, in that several friends, family members had copies of this, and I also remember the video at the time, and there were some interviews on the TV, I think, with Ozzy and where's it gone? Played on the album. So I always get confused. Zach Wild. Yeah. Pretty on the Inside. Didn't get into them until the following album. So, what's it called? Live Through This, yeah. Billy Bragg. I've seen him several times now. But I didn't buy this album for some reason. I'm not sure why. I don't know what it's got on it. Yeah. Where did I get up to? That one, 1990. I think I mentioned that in a previous episode. Screamadelica by Primal Scream. Yes, one of those albums from that period. Really cool, interesting album. Again, real interesting mashup of different things. But I didn't listen to it until 2000s. But yeah, it did really well, I think, in various prizes and end of year stuff. Trompe de Monde. I can't remember if this is the album where I first sort of discovered the Pixies, or whether it was Doolittle. I was lucky enough to see the band in the 2010s when they played Halifax. I think they did the whole of Doolittle, but I'm not sure about that. Yeah, never mind, I've already mentioned. This was another band where several of these tracks local bands used to cover, one of which was Suck My Kiss and Give It Away. And so I didn't buy this album until, a couple of years after it came out, I don't think. Oh yeah, this is the one with, Everything I Do For You. I think I probably have a copy of this, but I had a friend she was big into it, so that's my excuse, and I'm sticking to it. So, Low in Theory, yeah, didn't listen to that till a long time after. Same with the Orbital album. It's a good album, but it took a few years, not until the later 90s. Swerve Driver. Another band that's sort of a part of that whole shoegaze scene, along with bands like Ride. Okay, what have we got in the closing months of the year? So this was their 6th album. They've been going a long time. I saw them in 2000 supporting Rob Halford at the London Astoria when it was still there. LA2, I think. Bad Motorfinger, I'd already mentioned. Ugly Kid Joe, what the hell did this have on it? As an EP. Okay. Wayward Sons of Mother Earth. So I never listened to this at the time. This had Martin Walker, or however you say that, who was originally in a band called Sabat, who I was a big fan of. And they do a really good cover of a Lizzie song, but I can't remember what album it's off of. And it's... Is it Down from the Came the Marching Men? Lord. Oh, is that? Wow, that's a cover of Sabre Dance. Yeah, don't know where it is. It'll probably come to me. Yeah, I can't remember what Thin track it is now. Yeah. It's off of Jailbreak. It's not Jailbreak. Yeah. Anyway. Oh, Effigy of the Forgotten by Suffocation. Yeah, another pivotal death metal band. Human by Death. So I was going to just look up the death timeline because it's where are they? Hang on. So let's go down to the band members. Boom. Yeah. so the era we're talking of this album is 91. So Steve DiGiorgio, the bass player, and then we've got Scott Carino. It's always difficult on here, isn't it, to try and work out when the albums were recorded and when they came out. So we've got Terry Butler, Bill Andrews and James Murphy. So yeah, so what we got? So this would be Scream Bloody Gore. This would be Leprosy, wouldn't it? Hang on. Where's it gone? Yeah, Leprosy, then Leprosy. So Human came out in 91. So Leprosy, Spiritual Healing, Human, which is, yeah. So Scream Bloody Gore, Leprosy, Human, Spiritual Healing. Okay. There we go, yeah. So Scott Reinhardt, Paul Masvidal, the guys from, would it be Cynic? Yeah, on that album. But on the previous album, yeah, you got James Murphy, Terry Butler, Bill Andrews. So it was a re-ad. Sometime around here, something went wrong. And they end up doing this tour without Chuck Schnolder. Yeah, so I don't even know if it doesn't seem to even mention that in the timeline. I don't think. I think it's glossed over a little bit. I'm just trying to see. So yeah, so there's mention here of like the early days when you got Death, you got Massacre, and then there's when James Murphy joined Spiritual Healing, Fired, okay, during the tour. Oh my word. Oh yeah, here we go. So, refused to perform in Europe at the end of the year due to poor management. Remaining members completed the tour without him, using members of the road crew as stand-ins. So, yeah. So that would have been end of what they're saying, end of 1990, yeah, because they recorded Human in 91. Okay. And an individual. Hang on, what am I doing here? I'm getting really muddled up, aren't I? Human. I'll bring it back up in a moment. Yeah, it is very confusing with them. But yeah, this is the bit I was thinking about. So, before they recorded Human, which came out in 91. Yeah, so the order is Scream Bloody Gore, Leprosy, Spiritual Healing, Human, and Spiritual Healing has James Murphy on it, and Terry Butler, Bill Andrews, and then Human has guys from Cynic and also Steve DiGiorgio. I am assuming he played on that because if you look at the timeline, he wasn't in the band for very long, and I always get, not surprisingly, things get a little confusing. sometimes with these timelines, because of course albums are often released, well, are released after quite a while after they're recorded sometimes. So, you know, although the member may or may not have been there when the album was released, they may have been there when the album was recorded. So yeah. Anyway. So yeah, sometime around about here was that fateful tour when the Wheels were actually end of 1990. Okay, yeah. So yeah. So there's 91 there. So yeah, sometime around here. Anyway. Alright. Who we got left? Parallels by Fate Warning. There's a really good track on here called Point of View, which was featured on one of those Hard and Heavy videos. I seem to remember it. But I never went down the Fates Warning rabbit hole. Just couldn't afford to, I don't think. This band I didn't get into till a lot later. Yeah, there's a number of sort of fairly big UK bands that were really peaking during this period. So Carcass were what? Third album in. Had Michael Amott on in the band, who ultimately went on to be Arch Enemy, to form Arch Enemy. Yeah, so major album for them, very influential on the melodic death metal scene. And it's interesting, like hearing them change from, I suppose, like a grindcore band, like a death metal grindcore band, into something much more technical. Yeah, another Godflesh EP. Blind by Corrosion of Conformity. This has got Dance of the Dead on it, is it? Yeah. Which is the main reason why I bought that album, but not until a little while afterwards. Night of the Stormrider, Iced Earth. They supported, when Heaven and Hell played, they were playing on the bill there with Lamb of God, I think. Yeah. Down in Brighton in the 2000s. Clandestine by Entombed, another Swedish death metal band, definitely in the ascendancy. So 1990s Left Hand Path, Clandestine, Wolverine Blues, changed their sound to be more like what they call death and roll. And I onboarded this band here sometime around 97, 98. So yeah, if you like a sort of groovy death metal band, Entombed are your band for that. Tone Like, I think this must be the second album. Yeah, more familiar with the first album. Yeah, here's another UK band, Cathedral. And because Carcass have an ex-member of Napalm Death in them, so do Cathedral. Lee Dorian in the case of Cathedral. Yeah. So first album. But I again, there's a band, that Carcass, Cathedral, rather sad I was a bit late to the party. It would have been nice to have listened to them at the time. I didn't listen to them until a lot later. And this is a sort of track I was aware of, which is Hopkins, The Witchfinder General. I think I have this album on CD, but the one that I bought first would have been Ethereal Mirror. But like I said, wasn't until the 2000s. But yeah, I need to listen to this band again. They're really cool. Yeah, or listen to some of the stuff I haven't listened to. Spine of God. Trying to remember if I'd listened to this or not. No, I think. Yeah, was it? I get confused with them. I know I've listened to later stuff by them, because I mentioned in another episode about Power Trip was when I discovered the band. but I can't remember if I ended up buying Spine of God or not. So debut studio album. Again, interesting different styles there. There was a Caius album out that year as well, which I may have inadvertently skipped over. We've got a second album by Green Day, but didn't really get into them until Dookie, when that came out. Yeah, where's the Caius album? Pretty sure that was out that year. Wasn't their debut album out? I'm going to have trouble finding it. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. There it is. Yeah, Mystics was under the Pixies. So Wretch. Yeah, debut album. Again, rather sad that I missed out on this band. Didn't get into them until after they split. I mean, they went on to form Queens of the Stone Age, or members of them were involved in Queens of the Stone Age, and there's another band as well. I sort of discovered them via listening to the Fu Manchu album from about 96, 97, sometime around there. And then, you know, discovered Stoner Rock and Caius, and so bought some of their earlier stuff. In terms of other things I wanted to talk about, so just quickly, I'm going to scroll down here, see if there's anything I didn't pick up on. So yeah, first Masugger album, alongside The Human Factor, in the same month I think this came out, Symbol of Salvation by Armoured Saint. It's got John Bush on it, excellent vocalist, who ended up in Anthrax and was supposedly going to sing in Metallica in the early days, I believe. Yeah, he's a really good singer. Didn't he get up on stage as well and sung with them for something? Yeah, Vinnie Moore, earlier album, his debut one, whatever that. He ended up in UFO, didn't he? I think. Yeah. Autopsy, Mental Funeral. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of classics this year. I'm scared to go over a lot of these death metal albums, actually, just in case. Yeah, Bolt Thrower, Warmaster. So yeah, death metal stroke grindcore, I think. Oh, were they grindcore in the early days? Not sure. Strong association with with the is it White Dwarf magazine? Didn't they do a cover CD for what do they make? Warhammer games, don't they? Is that right? Yeah, the Warhammer games. It's all coming back to me, see. I'm on fire this morning. I went for my nice walk and had a second breakfast. So, Death Shall Rise by Cancer. So James Murphy had been on the previous album. Butchered at Birth. Not going to I'll go over that one. Yeah, I've never really been into Cannibal Corpse. At the time, I assumed they were a joke band, like a bit like Gua. Yeah, so I didn't really listen to anything by them. Don't know what gave me that assumption, but yeah, that was the trouble. Pestilence, Testament of the Ancients this is Dutch death metal band. So yeah, there's some, I think, in addition to the Swedish ones, I think there's some Finnish death metal bands and Dutch death metal bands that also had big hits that year, or pivotal albums, I think is the phrase that I'm looking for. Cult, Ceremony, Crowbar, was that their debut? Yeah. Sludge band. Didn't get into them until several albums later. Ceremony, that one, 5th studio album, wasn't really keeping up with the Cult. Time Does Not Heal by Dark Angel. Probably more familiar with them through, what is it? Darkness Descends. Yeah. Say about Clandestine. Anyway, I'm going to include links to all of this stuff anyway, so you can look through at your leisure. I was just curious if there was anything specifically I wanted to talk about because of the sort of big sea change in all the sub-genres of extreme music that was going on. Zentrix had their Dilute to Taste EP. I can't remember when they did the Ghostbusters cover, to be honest with you. I didn't listen to, in preparation for this episode, I did listen to 1 or 2 tracks off of some key sort of death metal albums and sub-genres around that period. And I remember Malevolent Creation coming up. There's a lot of, there's a couple of bands that still had quite heavy grindcore, hardcore punk influences as well at that time, who had a bit more of a sort of abrasive, chainsaw guitar sound. Several of them hadn't gone through the sort of Morris Sound production process. So it's interesting to hear all the the bands that were going that hadn't been to Morris Sound, or bands that were maybe using other producers who had a similar reputation. So yeah, it's interesting how that was working out for various bands. At the Gates, Gardens of Grief, was that their very first release? I didn't get into them until way after. I think they'd broken up by the time I was listening to them, and it was obviously through Slaughter of the Soul. So yeah, sometime in the 2000s maybe a little bit earlier, but probably the 2000s. Yeah. Films. So yes, let us look at box office for 1991, the number 1 films: Home Alone, Arachnophobia, Rocky V, Kindergarten Cop, Three Men and a Little Lady, Green Card, Look Who's Talking 2, Dances with Wolves, Highlander 2, The Quickening, Sleeping with the Enemy, The Doors, Misery, Mermaids, Silence of the Lambs, Naked Gun 2.5, Robin Hood, Terminator 2, The Commitments, City Slickers, Fisher King, Point Break, Hot Shots, and Addams Family. A lot of those I did see on video after the fact, quite a number of them. The only ones I probably saw at the cinema was Silence of the Lambs and I think Terminator 2. I don't know if there was anything else. I don't remember seeing Point Break at the cinema, I don't believe. But those were the 2 that I saw when they came out. But a lot of the other ones definitely watched on video. And in the US, so Home Alone, Sleeping with the Enemy, Silence of the Lambs, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, Out for Justice, yeah. So there's a whole series of Steven Seagal films that were very popular at the time to rent out. FX2, may have seen that at the cinema, because I remember I had a friend who was going on about the original, I think. So yeah, I remember seeing that. Backdraft, yeah, I'm not sure if I did see it at the cinema or not. Terminator 2 I've already mentioned again. Yeah, things like Dead Again I did watch several years, year or so, whenever it came out on VHS and that would be rental, not buying them actually. So yeah, on rental. House Party. Oh, this, yeah, saw on video. Cape Fear. This was really good. But another one I saw on video. I did see Star Trek 6. Is that? Yeah, I saw that at the cinema. Yeah. Cool. Okay. So hopefully that was informative. Hopefully shorter than the original 2-hour one that I shot. Thanks once again for watching. Bye for now, and I will catch you in a future episode.